Warning. The following scenes may contain references to power pages and portals which some listeners may find disturbing, especially if you've struggled with poor training in the past. Hey all, Franco Musso here. Yes, I've hacked your podcast feed. I've held John and Mike hostage, but don't worry, I got my wires crossed and I'm actually paying them a small ransom in the form of sponsorship. Go figure. So, by popular demand, I'm cooking up 2 brand new offerings to help you get your portal projects off the ground in 2024. The first is my group coaching program launching in March. Join me and a cohort of other budding portal makers for live coaching sessions, weekly live training, office hours, Q&A and surgeries. I'll guide you through the process from zero to launch, all at a fraction of the cost of hiring a freelancer or a contractor. It's like having a trusted partner on hand, helping you avoid the pitfalls, saving you a ton of money, headache and time. Plus, you're bound to learn lots from others in the group as we discuss their experiences, challenges and solutions. To apply, head on over to francomusso.com/group-coaching. You can now take your fingers out of your ears and enjoy the awesome that is Sprint Zero.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Sprint Zero podcast. My name is Mike Gowland and I'm joined by my co-partner rat in crime, John Russell. Say hello, John.
Hello, how are you? You alright?
I'm okay. I'm feeling better now, but we'll see how it goes. We've got a lot to go today because we're actually recording 3 episodes throughout the day, so it's going to be interesting.
Sorry about that.
See how we. I'm going to hire someone else to do the scheduling. So, right, today we have a very special guest who is nothing short of a Power Platform superstar. He is the man behind the mic, the legend from down under, the one and only Mark Smith, also known to the world as the NZ365 guy. Mark isn't just a Microsoft MVP, he's a trailblazer, a mentor, and a voice that has been bringing the community together through his Microsoft Business Applications podcast since 2017. Mark is also the force behind the 90-day mentoring challenge. The alumni is long and distinguished, and many people have improved their careers using this learning tool with his expertise, myself being one of them. He's also an aficionado of robotic lawnmowers. Mark, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
It's very good. I'm pleased to be here. It's always good to be on this side to have myself microphone on the
I thought I did the sound check. He sounds terrible, doesn't he, John? And John's on mute.
You are a bit croaky there, Mark. I'm not sure.
I'm croaky.
Yeah, could you have a check? No, it's not a problem.
Okay, is that better?
There you go.
There he is.
Nice.
There you go.
Nice.
One little setting on my distorter was on. I hadn't seen it.
How are you?
My bad.
You're right.
Very good. Are you going to edit that bit out?
No, I think it's quite funny. I'll just keep it as it is, I reckon. Yeah. Mark, I mean, we've spoken before on your podcast, and you know, you're what's the word I'm looking for? Prolific on LinkedIn. You know, you my friend are everywhere. First of all, I just want to say thank you very much for coming on the podcast because it means a lot to us. And the first question I've got for you really is can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your background and kind of how you've got to where you are today?
Yes, I can. I started off life on a dairy farm, so that meant milking cows to supply milk to the local dairy factory. I did that till 18 years old. When I left school, I never went on to university because I hated school. The concept of dyslexia hadn't been diagnosed at that point. I didn't start reading till I was 13 years of age. So you can imagine education wasn't a big feature in my life. And my father particularly, you know, who was a dairy farmer and left school when he was 14, he just wasn't a big believer in education. So he didn't encourage it. And I went straight from high school at 18 leaving into my first job, which was mowing lawns. I was a groundskeeper at a school and I did that for 3 years. So hence my love of lawnmowers, as you are both aware.
So I want to know more about this robotic lawnmower, because I have seen it, and this thing's not just a Roomba with a razor blade, right? This is like state-of-the-art military-grade lawnmower business.
Yeah. So Momotion is the product, and it was invented by a robotics company in China last year. And I suppose all the mowers out there in the market have been from mower manufacturers like Husqvarna, for example, is a big one in Europe. They've been around for years, and then they're like, oh, this robotics is a new thing. How do we make our mowers robotic, right? Where in this case, it was the other way around. It was a robotics company that said, what can we do that would have mass appeal? And so they're already a robotics company, and they decided to create this lawnmower, and they just went about it a totally different way. So it outperforms the most expensive products in the market, which are like 2 to 3 times their price.
Wow.
It outperforms it, does an amazing job. In fact, right now it's outside. For me, it's late at night, and it's out in the dark, and it's mowing my neighbors, apart from seeing the red little flashing lights as it goes across my paddock. Nobody hears it, sees it. You just come out. You just always see, I just get constant comments about how amazing my lawn looks, and it's all automated.
So with the 2 red lights, do you also play the Imperial March theme tune as it goes around? And
a lot of people are asked for add-on features like that. Like, could you add a sound? Could you add a camera?
Oh
They're
my God, yeah, a microphone. So you can talk to
awesome.
people. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So Mark, what does it mean to you to be an MVP? Do you think everyone in the Microsoft space should have the goal of becoming an MVP? Do you think it's for everyone, or?
Well, for me, the reason way back, which is I'm about to my 13th year as an MVP. Well, that's if I get renewed. Being that we're in that renewal cycle right now, I wanted it, right? I went out of my way to get it because nobody in New Zealand had it back then in business applications. And so I wanted to, I realized that to get the ear of Microsoft on the other side of the world, the only way that I could see was to be in the MVP program back then. And back then, like in BizApps, there might have been less than 30 people in that entire program globally. So it was pretty tight, bunch. But I knew if I didn't get that, if I could, I should try and get into the program. So it was actually Microsoft that nominated me in New Zealand into the program. And yeah, it's been highly beneficial in my career, without a doubt. It's opened doors. It's allowed me to travel the world. I've gone to close to 50 countries around the world now. I've always, Jonas, for example, he was the first one, MVP, to welcome me to Sweden, took me out to lunch when I traveled there. And I just find that wherever you go in the world, there are MVPs that are only too welcoming to show you the world. So if you're like, there's a lot of, it's often referred to as a family of folks that you can connect with anywhere in the globe. So there's that benefit. I've got in trouble for talking about the financial benefits, right? I've got a YouTube series on how to become an MVP. It's about 33 videos, and I recorded that all while I was in London. And this is when I was determined to be consistent on YouTube for 33 times. And that was the end of that series. And I didn't really continue with YouTube after that, apart from using it as an archiving tool for my podcasts. And, I got in trouble because I talked about the financial impact on one's career. And I mean, other MVPs have talked numbers like $700,000. It's added to their career over their career of having the MVP that I've heard. I have not looked at or seen the price point that I could have put on it. But the biggest thing the MVP program has enabled me is to create connections with Microsoft folks in Seattle. And that, then secondary, has opened up untold doors to me, and opportunities to work with Microsoft in, like, not because I'm an MVP, but the MVP got me the relationship, and then the relationship turned into something else after that. And so, Rick McCutcheon, he's an MVP in BizApps in Canada, and I was interviewing him once, and I said, does everybody, should they seek to become an MVP? Is it for everybody? And he said, listen, if your career is in the Power Platform or Dynamics 365, and like, it's your serious career, that's what you're going to do for the next 5, 10, 15 plus years, the MVP will only benefit you in that scenario. If you're just on a Power Platform project or a Power App project, and it's going to be done in 6 months, and then you're going to be on to, you know, a SharePoint project or something else, or, you know, you're going to get involved with Pega or SAP, and then you haven't set your sight on having a career in this space, it's not worth you doing it. You know, it's probably not going to be there from the value you get. But, and I've talked to it about, you know, based on your question about the value for me. And then the flip side is, of course, the value for me has come about because I have then created value in the first place for other people, right? And if you look at the concept of MVP, it actually comes from a concept of what's known as a maven. And there was a book some years ago by Malcolm Gladwell, and he talked about mavens and the release of the Lexus car and how I think Toyota owns Lexus from memory. They went out and they found these key people that, you know, as they had put out concept cars, these people would rave about them. And they were kind of like, and this term came about, they were mavens. They were people that weren't on the payroll of the company, but were just so excited, and they would give, they felt that they had to be true to the integrity of the brand, and they would, you know, call out the bad stuff. They'd call out the good stuff, and they became known as an independent voice. And so, you know, if you type the word review into the search engine, you'll find millions of reviews, right? Because this concept of a third party, an independent voice saying something, other people listen to that. And so Microsoft capitalized on that themselves. And one thing, and this will get your podcast banned, it'll mean neither of you are going to get MVP if you hear this, is that at the end of the day, Microsoft is not a charity. They didn't set up the MVP program so everybody could feel warm and fuzzy about their contribution to the community. They set it up right because it makes Microsoft millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, the MVP program. So everyone thinks it's for the love of it, but it's not. The fact is that if someone in a forum answers correctly a question, that's a case deflection of going through to their support desk. That case is a quantifiable measure of money for Microsoft. Yep. And I remember hearing a stat that one MVP alone had deflected a close to $2 million worth of cases in 1 year.
Wow.
Right? So you can imagine, Microsoft didn't do this for the kumbaya, the love, the community. Yes, that's a byproduct of absolutely, but if it wasn't generating money for Microsoft or benefit for Microsoft, the MVP program wouldn't exist today.
It's all right. I wasn't going to get MVP anyway, was I, John?
Yeah, let's not talk about that one. So yeah, MVP is kind of like Microsoft's way of certifying non-Microsoft employees, which then they become the evangelists for the product. And yeah, I mean, it is an amazing business model. It's ridiculous.
So smart, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think
the return on investment's phenomenal.
I'm trying to think if there are any other companies that do something similar.
Well, there are other businesses that have MVP programs, but what Microsoft have also done in the past is they've always released their betas out to the public, right? Because it's a free resource of testers.
Yeah.
That's valid,
right?
Yeah. That's
people
valid.
who are willing to go and install the latest cutting edge dodgy version of Windows to see how it works because they want to.
And actually, it's proper A/B testing. It's like heuristic testing on an absolutely massive scale, which is really valuable. Mark, I just want to go back to like your kind of like story of like how you got here, and you talked about dyslexia and stuff. So my sister-in-law is amazingly well timed. Her name's Lizzie. She is a clinical nurse practitioner, recently qualified, and She was. I'm just gonna read this out. We're probably gonna have to blink it, but I think it's important to read it out. So she said, at secondary school, age 15, 16 years old, I had an extremely unhelpful interview with a careers advisor, and this delightful man looked me square in the face and said, "Yes, well, to be perfectly honest, looking at what sets you're in, as in what levels you're in, and your mock GCSE results, I would best advise you just try and get some work in the supermarket." Well, on Saturday, big man, I found out that I've qualified as a clinical nurse specialist and have secured a band 7 against all the odds. I've achieved quite a lot more than trying to just get work in a supermarket, and think that maybe, just maybe, you with the wrong person. Now, I think that's very. It makes me a bit emotional, actually, because I'm very close with Lizzie. She's a lovely person, and just because she had a little bit of spark about her, she kind of made a path for herself. And what could you give to people? What advice could you give to people who are dyslexic? Maybe they are kind of like, 17, 18. They're trying to find their way in the world a little bit. And that is very daunting at that age anyway. If we think about when we go back to that age, I found that very difficult. But if you've got that added complexity of dyslexia, what is it that you could maybe turn on and switch on that will help define your career path?
Yeah. Well, look at some of the stuff Richard Branson has said on the subject, right? Who is a dyslexic, who's a billionaire, himself, English chap, of course, that built this massive global empire, and he sees it as a superpower. Because one of the things that I can do is I can see possibility instantly. My brain just sees it, without me kind of having a way of understanding why it sees it or why I perceive things. And so I suppose to a degree, you got to focus on what the positives are of your talent, your skill, your X factor, than the negatives. Now, the negatives, in my personal experience, always comes from academia, and that I, in their eyes, was dumb.
Yeah.
Right? So my constant talk track at school, I was the bottom of the class. I was dumb. I couldn't retain numbers. I couldn't, write essays. I couldn't. So I was just labeled as dumb. And so by the time you finish school, you've kind of got into that narrative. Like, university wasn't even a consideration for me because I just, I would not have the exam passes to do that. And in fact, it got so bad that in my final year of school, I didn't even attend some exams because I'm like, well, what's the point? I know what the result's going to be, right? And so I think the thing is, the world's come a long way since then. They didn't even have a label for it back then, or a realization that just because you didn't learn in a certain way didn't mean, that you should be held back. And so I now see it as a superpower that I have by being dyslexic, because of the ability for my mind, as I say, to see, I suppose, opportunities and risks and things like that. I can just see them, like they just pop in my mind. And when I start to get on a thought thread, I can just riff. And if I'm not taking notes, I lose so much because it just bubbles out of me, type thing. And so ideas just keep flowing. The thing is that the two main things that caught me in the business world, particularly because, naturally I didn't stay at groundskeeping. And after 3 years, I ended up, computer training was becoming a big deal back then, and the internet had come out. And so I was like, I like to get into this web design, right? I can learn a bit of that. And I ended up, getting into my first certification exam I did was NT4. Right, this is Windows NT4 certification way back in the day, and I passed that certification, and so and that really launched my IT career. I could see something that I could identify in. Now the beauty is, computers helped me in my weakest point, which was spelling. Right, I sucked at spelling. In fact, I've had a colleague say, like, quote, whenever you write something, it makes my eyes bleed.
Ow.
That was his quote.
People say that about our logo as well.
Right? What's that?
People say that about our logo as well.
Yeah. And the thing is, right, now, as you, I suppose, grow older and you get more comfortable in your own skin, I just laugh at that, right? It's a joke. He wasn't being malicious and saying it. I'll be the first to admit that I can't spell, but, Grammarly has absolutely helped me phenomenally in this respect because it's helped me do sentence structure. It's helped me, use fancy words to make me look more intelligent than I am in my sentences. And of course, it corrects my spelling. And so I've been on the pro version of Grammarly for maybe 6 years. I think as long as the Grammarly's been out there, I pay for it. And that means it works on the keyboard on my iPhone. It works, in all the browsers, etc. The only time it doesn't work is when corporate policy blocks it from working because they see it as a keylogger.
Oh.
That's the risk profile of something like Grammarly because it's obviously handing back everything you're typing to a server, get validated and sent back to your device. So there is that risk profile in it, but it definitely has empowered me in my weakest area because I realized that no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't get really any better at spelling. In other words, it was diminishing returns for me to try and just focus on really getting good at spelling. And so I was like, well, it's better that I study on things that I enjoy and I love, like anything around IT and technology and stuff like that, and just be comfortable that I'm gonna make spelling mistakes from from time to time.
Yeah, I think like what you said about it being your superpower. I mean, I'm coming to terms with me having ADHD, and it's definitely my superpower, but it also can be a weakness for me, and I'm trying to kind of work out that happy medium. I think one thing that I've noticed though, and I don't know whether or not you agree with this, but I have to be passionate about something. Like I'm really passionate about the Power Platform. I'm passionate about this podcast. I'm passionate about speaking to new people. But if I'm not passionate about something, then I'm going to get very disinterested very quickly. Sometimes, especially if we're say we go to a 60th, 70th birthday party, and I don't really know many people there.
Yeah.
And it's all about small talk, and I'm like, yeah. And
so do you know how I filter that type of stuff?
Don't go.
For me now, my trigger point is this. It's either hell yeah or no. So when my wife says, should we go on vacation with those people? And I'm like, well, that's straight away. It's not a hell yeah, so it's no. Should we go see my parents for Christmas? Or it's no, because it's not a hell yeah. And I tell you, it's allowed me to filter so much stuff. I started applying it in work meetings. See a meeting go into my diary and I'm like, well, I'm just like tagging along here. They just want declined because it wasn't hell yeah. I reckon I could add value or this is a great topic or whatever. Now, sometimes you got to suck it up, but I tell you what, that little filter mechanism has made my life a lot happier.
So you're almost being very candid about what you want to do and what you don't want to do, right? You're not taking that middle ground of okay, I'll go along, okay, I'll sit in this meeting, but it's actually like, can I contribute? Yes. If I can't, no, don't waste my time. I'm just gonna carry on.
See, I really suck at that, like really badly, and it comes across.
What saying no?
Saying either of those things, hell yeah or no. Because my problem is that I'm constantly thinking about what other people are thinking, and that's a big issue for me. I know it's a big issue for me. And that kind of like, because I feel like I'm on the cusp of some kind of eye-opening awakening, because on the 1st of April I'm joining the 90-day mentoring challenge, and
nice.
And I am really, really looking forward to this, like big time. And I know Mike, I think Mike will be okay for me saying this, but I think Mike has said to me before that it's kind of been transformational for him. And I've worked very closely with Mike for over a year, and I have noticed that I have really recognised that transformation.
Wow.
And I'm not even through all the content yet, so say something.
That's amazing.
But it's just really good. So what I want to know though is where did that idea come from, and how did you? I think one of the key things here is actually the scalability of that program. And wonder if you could talk to both of those points.
So I was sitting in my flat in West Hampstead, London, must have been 2017, 2018, around that time frame, 2018, I think it was. And one of the things was, people had asked me for mentoring, and I noticed that mentoring was kind of elitist in that, you could only get the mentoring if you knew somebody that was offering mentoring. And there was a guy who I met with a couple of times in London, Mohammed. He was doing mentoring, and he would mentor 6, 7, or 8 people. And I was like, in my mind, it's just one of those things. I always look at, how can I scale something? How can I make it ubiquitous and available to everybody? And how do I make it, for example, for people in Nigeria, Africa, in a lot of the Eastern European type locations? How do I make it for people that do not have an MVP in their country, do not have Microsoft in some cases in their country? How do I make it available to everyone? You think this is pre-COVID, right? So the concept of doing it all online was a foreign concept. It wasn't like this was the way they were doing it. And so what I did is that, I start everything often with a mind map, and that I just say, I put an idea in the middle, and then I'll riff on that idea until my mind is empty. And so I ended up with this massive mind map to what it could be. And then I take each one. In the second session, I start to break it down. I was like, okay, one, why did the 90-day mentoring challenge? Because I didn't want to call it mentoring. Because one thing with having such a popular name like Mark Smith, and why I created NZ365 Guy, is because if you're not a unique name online, people can't find you. So I chose 90-day mentoring challenge, and I now own that phrase on the internet, right? Nobody else has it. If anyone Googles that, they're going to find it. And so from get-go, I always branded it straight away so it was findable. So when I used Twitter, LinkedIn, things like that, it created a consistent approach to people hearing that. And then, I was like, I put up a form online and said, register your interest type thing. And the landing page back then was like, I'm going to talk on these 6 subjects. And that was about it. It was very light. And a whole bunch of people signed up. Maybe 40 people signed up that first time, and from all over the place. A great lot of them all became MVPs. And I was like, oh man, there's something here. And one of the things that really came out of it is people felt like they were being seen, and their scenario and their challenges were being observed. And the one guy that joined that first one worked at Fender Guitars, right? And he was their admin of their dynamic CRM system, which he just got handballed to him, right? And so he thought all the roles in the world, because he loved the CRM piece, Dynamics, what is now Dynamics 365 sales. He loved it. And he was like, man, could I do a career in this space? And so somehow he heard about the 90-day mentoring challenge. He signed up. And one of the things I do is look at all the career paths that you could possibly have inside of business applications. Now, he went on and he's now become a consultant. He's a solution architect. And his wife then did the next 90-day mentoring challenge. And he it blew his career open. He's met me at conferences, it's stories like that where I see that I have experience. I've been with business apps and Microsoft since 2003. So over 20 years now, coming up 21 years. And I've seen a lot because I've worked in New Zealand, Australia, the Philippines, Singapore, Hong Kong, London, the US, and then remotely across other geos as well. You see a lot, right? I've founded my own practices. I founded a company in New Zealand called Magnetism, and built that up. It's still operational today. I've worked with big companies. I'm working for IBM right now, right? 350,000 employees. It's not small. And I've been involved in building big practices. I've always been partner side, although I have been employed by Microsoft for about 1 week. as an FTE, and I resigned before I started because, long story, the CEO of the company I was working for, when they found out that I had resigned because I was going to Microsoft, said, you name it, and we'll make it happen if you'll stay. And so in that case, I was working in Australia, and I wanted autonomy to run all the states in Australia in this business, rather than at each state. And we did that, and we grew it to 25 million in about 2 years. BizApps practice, and that was just on CRM. That wasn't even, we weren't even doing F&O back then. We weren't doing Power Platform, anything like that, you know. And so that was the thing. I knew I had this kind of experience mix that I could help people with. And the other thing, so I was freelancing while I was in London. The whole time I was there, I was freelance, mainly working for Microsoft on contract in Seattle, as in they would book me on project-based work. And I realized that there's one thing kept resonating for me, is that in a lot of companies, they will say, oh, you need a mentor. Even when I joined at IBM, they're like, you need a mentor in the business. And the mentor is never about your career, right? It's about how you can fulfill the vision of the company, right? And how you can slot into a path that supports the business outcomes. It's not about looking at an individual and going like, where is your sweet spot? Where are you going to be most fulfilled? And I use the word fulfilled rather than happy, because sometimes there's work that has to be done, right? You have to do it. It's part of it. And I'm not saying you go and you get to this kind of rainbows and jelly beans and unicorn place where you have a job that pays you to do everything you love. I just don't think that's a real life scenario. But I think you can get on a path that plays to your individual strengths. But most people don't know what their individual strengths are. And so they take on roles that sound attractive. One of them is the word manager in the title. Sounds attractive. Where I advise to run a mile from it, right? Because, you know, unless you're cut out for, you know, at the end of the day, if you look at MBAs and things like this spit out by universities, they are designed to create managers, not leaders. And there's a fundamental difference. In the world we live in, big corporations, they love managers. People that don't think for themselves, they follow the company line. They get as many people to, you know, follow the company line as possible. And I just find that so demoralizing. And so I don't buy into it. And so I suppose, when's this going to go publish?
Yeah, probably.
Well, today you'd be listening to it right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, as long as it's after April 1st, 2024, I will have resigned from IBM, so I'll be gone. Because I've realized that working for this big corporation for the last 3 years, more than ever, and I see the top consulting firms all conform to this pattern, is that you are literally just a pawn in their game. I have never seen an employer, and as you know, my wife worked for Google for 10 years. And I really thought Google was the epitome of amazing. They really did look after their staff, right? Until the shareholders said we wanted more money, and they started cutting, and then they started cutting, and the culture of, you know, don't do evil was removed from their corporate policies and things like that, right? And that went downhill. And so even big corporations find it hard to really value their staff long term. You have to be an incredible individual contributor to really garner that top tier of one salary, and also that you can command how you want to work because you're bringing the X factor to the game. Otherwise, you're a pawn, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think for me, like personally, with the 90-day challenge is, and I joke about this a lot, and I joke about it when I start my sessions, that I accidentally became a consultant, but it's very, very true. I did accidentally fall into that space, and I never got that mentoring of actually what's it mean to be a consultant, what's expected, what should you do, what shouldn't you do, how should you behave. I wouldn't say that I've not obviously been a bad consultant because I've been doing it for 8 years, but then the mentoring challenge has really opened my eyes to how I could be better at it.
Yeah.
And some of those behaviours. So that, like, just that alone was worth the price of admission. And I think that may have been like the first 3 modules or something, and then like that was so transformative to me. That's completely changed my career and my role.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Which is awesome, right?
Yeah.
It's awesome because, like, if you one thing, you know, I've always felt about business applications because, I never had a degree and got into this, and yet I've been able to carve out an amazing career. And you think the career of mine affects my wife, it affects my children, it affects my extended family, it affects the community around me. And I just find this is a job that so many people, it doesn't matter if you're a hairdresser and you want to level up. If you're a builder and saying, you know what, I'm getting that wrist damage from, slamming that hammer. I want to get out of the physical labor job. This allows you, in the shortest path possible, I feel, to become a technologist. And therefore, you can bring so much value. And the other thing is I love about this, it's an industry that's not ageist, right? The other day, I'm talking to an MVP who's straight out of school, 19 years old, right? And then I've had people on the program that have been in their late 50s that have decided just to commit 3 months of their life to the 90-day mentoring challenge, doing Power Platform certifications and things like that. And they've launched themselves into a whole new career that they could never believe was possible. And it's those type of things. It's not ageist. It's not like as long as you have a desire to learn. And I think that's another X factor. If you're hungry to better yourself and better your standing in life or your position and what you contribute, you don't look past the Power Platform because it has so many different roles, positions, opportunities for people to make something of themselves in technology without having a comp sci degree.
Definitely. If there was one bit of advice you could give to anyone coming into business applications, what would it be?
To start with, you need to get certified, right? Because what it'll do is formally take you through a way of learning about the Microsoft tech. The other bit of advice I'd give is never settle for where you are if you feel you've got more and you want to go higher. Like, keep climbing. And if you have to change employer to do that, change employer.
Yeah, I mean, it's very good advice. I mean, I would say I was stuck in roles, really. I was at the BBC for 10 years, which, on your CV, it does look, good because, of who it is. And then I went to Amazon and I did that for 7 years. And it wasn't really until I had kind of come out of both of those and I thought, hold on a second. I had a real epiphany moment when I was working at Amazon, when I realized that, we were talking for hours about how someone couldn't watch the latest episode of Downton Abbey in by pressing play in 200 milliseconds. I've talked about it before, but that was when Grenfell Tower happened, and I remember sitting on a floor on holiday in Portugal and having a moment and thinking, I need to do something else. I can't be doing this all the time. And that really did lead the pathway to get into, not that I knew it at the time, but that was the pathway that led me to consultancy. It's very interesting. And I saw your LinkedIn post about if you're not happy, that's not right. I think if you're not being, reward is definitely part of it, right? But I think for me also there are a lot of other personal factors. I'm quite an empathic person, so I also have to think about how I fit into an organization, and if I'm doing lots of other stuff other than just my day-to-day job, then I know that I'm quite happy where I am. But yeah, it's an interesting one, and it's definitely a conundrum. But I'm going to revert back to your hell yeah or no thing, and I'm going to have a conversation with my wife about that tonight, because I think that's it's pretty bold, but that's where I need to get to.
Yeah, like, do you know what? I'll even do it over a cup of coffee. If the coffee sucks, I'm not going to just drink it because I've paid for it. I'm like, I won't tell the wait staff or anything that their coffee sucks. I just won't drink it. because we've, coming from the colonies, we've still got a bit of that British, we don't want to ruffle feathers.
Yeah.
We're not like Americans, right? That'll just, call the whole management over because the coffee's cold or something like that. But I won't drink a coffee because it's just kind of like, man, I don't know. The older you get, the shorter life seems, and the less, you're talking about worrying about what people think. And statistically, the research is showing they're not actually thinking about you at all.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
And like I read this poem of a dude that died and just how quickly the company would replace his role, him. He wouldn't be thought of. In fact, your family, within 24 months, you won't even be in their mind every day anymore. It's a pretty morbid thing, right? And that's like, it's people are less into, everyone's into like, what do people think of me? And, but yeah, everybody's into that. And so therefore, if you can get comfortable with not caring at all. And so this is what my wife does. She goes to me, listen, we're going to this event that I've agreed to go with because of other people's benefit. And she just tells me up front, remember to talk to these people, smile, like have a conversation. And if I go into my mindset like that, now I'm there because I'm not there to make me happy. I'm there to make their day cool. And that's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I just find them, boring AF. And so therefore I'm just like, my phone's pretty exciting at the moment in the corner of the room.
I've got another variation of your hell yeah or no, because I think you hinted at it at the start when you said it. It's actually hell yeah or Now, if you do a it defaults to a no. It doesn't default to a hell yeah. So I know you're a man of many trademarks, so I know you've probably got that hell yeah or no. So I'm gonna do hell yeah or
Yeah, TM.
Well, John, what about your own trademark of nice?
Nice. Yeah, and I've also got the at work, a couple of people noticed that I quite often say, or on Teams I'll go and that's now known as the John Russell, which means there's something not right. Yeah. So
I can read it.
We are now going to jump over to our fast becoming regular / popular segment. Hopefully, Mike is on the playback there. Hold on. So, again, no budget spent. We have
serious production value.
We've got this section called Uncomfortable Corner. And so, Mark, when was the last time you felt uncomfortable, whether that's in or out of work? How did you manage to get through it? And, what did you learn from yourself that if it happened again, you would do it maybe slightly differently?
So this is an easy one for me. 2 weeks ago, I presented at the Canadian Power Platform Summit. The first time I've presented in 5 years in front of got up and presented. And because I have a lot of energy, I also have I suppose you'd call me an emotional person. So when I say uncomfortable, somebody on the current 90-day mentoring challenge was speaking at that event also, and I met her in the hallway with another person on the current 90-day mentoring challenge. Both of them were there, and she was saying, "I'm freaking out, of going to present on this subject," and I said, "Mate, I'm freaking out." And in fact, as I'm talking to her, I started crying, and that's for me. I have to bring emotion to really communicate the energy of some subject. And was it because I'd just done MVP Summit for the week and I hadn't slept enough? Yeah, maybe. Had I been, smacking back a few bourbons every night? Yeah. And so had I been away from my family and my 2 little kids and my wife for 10 days at that point? Yeah. I felt uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable about even presenting again because it had been so long and, since I had presented, and, I get incredibly nervous. whenever I go to present, even though I've been doing it for years. And you know what, this type of presentation is quite different than what I do in my day-to-day job, as in when I'm talking with executives. I feel like I'm right in my zone there. I am like, you throw the curliest question at me, I'm comfortable. I get called in because I can generally answer any of those scenarios. And I can really read an audience around a boardroom table and tailor it on the fly to what I'm doing. When you're dealing with a room where you don't know any of the stakeholders in there, right? You don't know whether they're coming from big companies, you don't know whether they're just new to the community, etc., and they don't know you, really. I do. I still get really nervous, and I found that heck of a nerve-wracking 2 weeks ago. So much so, as I said, I cried just in talking to this girl and encouraging her, and that she would nail it. And I said, listen, even for me, and that's when I welled up and started to tear up. And so I find that no matter how much I present when I'm, on a stage presenting, I still get nervous. I still second guess, if you like, what I'm presenting on. And it's not that I'm not comfortable with knowing my subject well. It's whether I'm comfortable to a degree knowing whether the people coming into that, audience, that what they're thinking they're coming for and what they're going to get is aligned. Did I match it up with a diverse audience? And so, yeah, that's me.
Zeke, in that instance, are you worrying what other people are thinking?
I'm worried. Am I worried about what they're thinking? I suppose I'm worried more that do I still have it?
Right.
Yeah. As I'm still aligned to what people need right now. Have I read the audience correctly? Like even my presentation topic that I did, which was around Center for Enablement. I'm like, why am I doing it on that? Like, because it's an area that I talk about because I'm frustrated with seeing so many companies doing it wrong. And so that's been born out of frustration. And like, I could do something on, I'm thinking at a conference doing one on how to create a side hustle in Microsoft business applications, right? How to create a secondary income stream. And that's just because I'm hearing a lot of people asking questions about it more and more in the community. More and more, we're living in this kind of economy where you have your primary job and then you have the stuff you do on the side that makes you a good little earner. And so I'm like, man, why don't I talk about that? Because I feel that would be, but then I'm like, the response off that session, right? I've had 2 big corporations in Canada reach out to me and say, how can we get you to come and, put a plan in for our business? So it absolutely hit the mark. The evals I got back were the best evals I've ever got in my life. Like, it wasn't 1 or 2, it was like 20 respondents responded. And I'm like, man, normally at these events, if you get 5, you're, wow, that's a good response. And then people don't use the comment section. They just do the yes, no answers, right? And then blank, I'm on to the next session. So I was blown away by that it obviously resonated and hit the mark, which makes me go, okay, like any good comedian, they don't do the joke once. They do it 50, 100 times, just same joke, different venue. They know how it lands. If you study the background of the Beatles and how the Beatles became famous, right? They used to play in Germany before they ever got awesome in the UK. And they played in bars, and bars were ruthless. If you sucked, you got a beer bottle thrown at you, type thing on stage. And so they got really good at getting their songs right and resonating with an audience. And so I feel so many times in our community, people present and they're like, bang, that one's done. I throw it away and I'll do a new one next time. And they don't actually refine what they're speaking on and get really good at it, because the Q&A session on the back of that, I was blown away by the questions, and I realized, oh my gosh, well, next time I do this, I should make sure I address these points before they become Q&A, because then what's going to happen next time, I'm going to get even deeper Q&A. And so I feel that a presentation should be done at least 5 or 6 times in our community.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Before gear up for another.
It's very interesting what you say that, because
different.
if me and Mike have presented about, just ask it a few times, We've talked to you about it, and we've also, presented it a few places. Last one being at the Microsoft user group, the Paddington user group, the D365 and Power Platform user group.
No, the virtual user group.
Oh no, the virtual user group was last, but but the Paddington one was interesting because we got some really interesting questions off the back of that. And it's like you're not giving the feedback space to improve that session if you don't do it again. So that's quite an interesting takeaway.
It's the whole minimum viable product thing, right? Test the idea on the audience, refine it. If you're just doing MVPs all the time and throwing them out, you're never getting to the goal based on that, feedback and drilling deeper and going deeper, and really to ultimately what you get is this communication that really resonates with the audience. And you can really, that if you deliver that and, same thing, different location, different audience, it's still going to resonate even more so with them because you've seen that reflection and got that feedback in past. Yeah. So I think there's that need, definitely. And you refine yourself, right? I've heard this in the last couple of weeks quite a bit, this whole concept of iron sharpens iron. When you do it, like in that audience, right, there was another MVP who I only saw at the end, who would have intimidated me had I seen him earlier on, because he's deeply technical architect. He's a full-on developer out of Prague, from memory, Thomas, and he's an amazing dude. And yet, after that, he came to me and said, "How can we work together?" Right? Like, how can we be on projects together? And it's just like, for me, it is, I don't know, there's always, some self-doubt in anything you do. And it's never gone away for me after 20 odd years of doing this. So
yeah, it's very interesting.
It's interesting that one we do, John, with Just Ask It, how we went from the demo we did with Chris. That was the first one we did. It was a little bit shaky. And then I think it was around January when we did it again on the Microsoft developer call. And just how refined we've got that. Because, one thing also, if you were presenting with others, is you got to get all those timings right, and you know when to play off each other. Yeah. So, like, me and John do a thing on this podcast. If we want to, interject with a question, we put our hand up on camera, which you may notice, Mark. And it's just little things like that when you work with others as well, you just pick up on those and you develop that. And it's all that refining. And I completely agree. Don't do a session once. Do it 4 or 5 times. Yeah. Different audiences, different venues, even the same venue later on. Come back and totally. show what's different. Show what's different about what you showed last time, right? Because things change all the time. This landscape is constantly evolving, and it's so difficult to keep up with everything that changes. So,
and it's not the same.
It even applies to blog
It's not the same people. That's an interesting point where you're going to say blog posts. Yeah, it's also when you do these things, it's not the same people there every single time. That's the other thing.
No, you never know when someone's just joining the journey, right? And so therefore, and the other thing is, I always say, sometimes people explain something and it's just like they've got an open pathway into your mind, and however they've said it, it just connects, and you're like, I get that, I never had that with my teachers at school. It always seemed foreign to me. I never knew what they were talking about. I never had that kind of connection. But that's why I encourage everybody. It doesn't matter. In fact, Gary Vaynerchuk says it. He said, listen, just turn the camera on, get in front of the microphone and talk about what you're doing, how you're learning as you start out, because people look at you and they'll go, oh my gosh, if you can do it, I could do it. Right. And that's why it's, you should never wait till you've made it. Right. Start now and get better. Like if you have a look at my podcast 1.0, which I did in Nottingham, sitting in an armchair with my Surface laptop and trying to speak into the microphone on it, while I was traveling. And it sucks, man. And it's bad. But the thing is, after, I've done 530 odd episodes now, you get better, right, as time goes on. But you're never going to be great on day one, but no athlete is, right? Nobody that's really successful in their careers just woke up and became good. It's practice.
Yeah.
And I think you pick up, don't you, when you start out these things. Like when we started out this podcast, we had to get a feel as to whether, okay, episode 1's going to suck. It kind of did. But we need to know whether we are going to be passionate about making it better, right? And whether it's going to stick. And that's what's happened with us right here is that it's stuck and we've continued going on. I think it's the same with anyone. Like, if you get discouraged just by the first game, you need to like try again at least to give it a chance.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So,
or do a hell yeah and no.
Hell yeah. Or the variation. So I think we're coming up to kind of end of time now. But like, first of all, Mark, I really wanted to say thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I know you're a very, very busy man. I can't wait to start the 90 mentoring day challenge. I think that's on Monday or Tuesday next week. I just wanted to say, from a personal point of view, like the times that I've spoken to you and also the times that I've listened to you, you are a very engaging listener, if that makes sense. Like, you can really tell that you actively are listening to what other people are saying, and I think that's a very special trait in not many people. So just wanted to say that. So you can find Mark on LinkedIn. He's got his MVP show and Power Platform show podcasts. He's also on Twitter and on his NZ365 Guy website. Links to the resources mentioned in the episode will be in the show notes. Music today was provided by our good friend Ken Like Fit. You can find his music on Spotify, the link of which you'll find in the episode show notes. Any additional music we've used, like the uncomfortable corner, or maybe you've heard the occasional chicken noise, will also be in the show notes. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss the next episode. We'd really appreciate it if you could follow us on LinkedIn. And if you are enjoying the podcast, please give it a review on your chosen podcast platform. Thank you very much. This has been Sprint Zero, and we've been Mike Garland. Say goodbye, Mike.
Mike who?
Lewis. Yeah, Lewis.
No, Mike Gowland, not Mike Garland. Bye, John.
Gowland then, okay. And Mark Smith. See you later, Mark. Thank you.
No, thank you.
And I've been John Russell. See you on the next episode.
Love you, John. Just to say that this podcast wouldn't be a thing if it wasn't for Mark Smith.
This is true. Yeah.
Love
you too.
True.
See you later.
Love you.
Warning. The following scenes may contain references to power pages and portals which some listeners may find disturbing. Especially if you've struggled with poor training in the past. Hey all, Franco Musso here again. Quick update on that hostage situation. Hopefully the smell isn't coming across the airwaves. I haven't let the guys use the bathroom yet, so the joke's definitely on me. Anyway, big announcement. I'm finally releasing my online Power Pages course. This has been 5 years in the making. It's tried and tested on citizen devs and portal makers all around the world. It's the course I wish existed when I was getting started. It's practical, it's hands-on, and it's project-based, so you're not wondering how the heck this would apply to the real world. I've built in battle-tested lessons I've learned from tens of successful portal projects across various industries, budgets and geographies, and I've formulated the most efficient route from zero to heroic launch. The tools and techniques I've chosen to show you are all based on what adds the most value to you, the learner, and to your customers, all in the most compressed timeline possible. Think 80-20, focusing on the techniques that punch above their weight and deliver the majority of results. You'll get video lessons, a repeatable framework, and some super helpful worksheets. Visit francomusso.com/power-pages-course and register your interest. Disclaimer, this course isn't for you if you prefer hours of slides, theory, and little to no action. You can now take your fingers out of your ears and enjoy the awesome that is Sprint Zero.